When you think about what could have been and what we're experiencing out in the Western Kentucky area right now today, in Illinois and Indiana, we were really blessed. I mean, I've learned more within the past day or so about a crevasse that I had never heard before. I mean, if you look at what they're having to do to try to save the town of Cairo, I mean, it puts into perspective some of the sacrifices and the heroic actions that people had to do here to save Nashville. We had individuals out on the locks counting and measuring as the water continued to rise, as decisions were being made during a time of chaos, and as you've heard us say, epic and unprecedented proportions. But we made it through. And that's something that we can really be proud about, is that we made it through. We didn't lose any infrastructure to that fight. I mean, if you really want to look at the losses that in terms of damage that was incurred in Cheatham, but in essence, we didn't really lose any structures. We were still able to fulfill our mission. Though lives were lost, we can honestly say that no lives were lost on the Cumberland River. They were lost on areas that were uncontrolled by the Corps. But that's nothing to really be proud about, because lives were still lost. There's billions of dollars in property that was lost, but there could have been considerably more in terms of those billions of dollars that could have been lost. You know, when we talk about, we saved 4 to 5 feet of flooding, we reduced that by the efforts, the aggressive efforts that our water management team, by our engineering folks, by our program folks, by our rangers, by our lock operators. It wasn't just one fight, it was by everybody that was here. We were able to reduce that. The damage could have been a lot more worse. So I like to utilize this time to just reflect on the blessing. When we look at August, that rainstorm event that came, and when we look at now today with the rainstorm events that came, that we've been able to endure this past April and well into May, we are blessed. And so I feel really fortunate to be able to stand here and say that, hey, though it is not occurring here, the people here, I'm feeling very proud of that. If that event happened again, we would have been all the better prepared for it, and our actions would have probably been the same. This is a great district. It's comprised of some great people that were able to execute a great mission. And so let's just take time today, hear from those who are actually on the front lines, because I know you've heard enough from me. You've probably heard enough from Bob Sneed in terms of breaking this thing down. But it gives us an opportunity to allow others to come here and share their story.
It is impossible to understand the May 2010 flood without first exploring the underlying rain event that caused it. On May 1st and May 2nd, 2010, Middle Tennessee was beset by intense rainfall, but this would prove to be no ordinary storm.
Basically, the May 2010 flood in Tennessee was caused by a very slow-moving, almost stationary upper-level low-pressure system that brought record or near-record rains to a lot of places Saturday and Sunday, the 1st and 2nd of May. And so a lot of places had extreme rainfalls one day, and then extreme rainfalls in the same areas the very next day, which led to incredible flash flooding and river flooding.
This event didn't just surpass the previous 2-day rainfall record, it crushed it.
Up until the May flood, the most it had ever rained in Nashville at the airport over a 2-day period was about 6.5 inches. We more than doubled that in the May flood. We actually had 13.5 inches on May 1st and May 2nd. That was not the most rainfall in Middle Tennessee. A lot of places had more than that. Even in the Nashville metro area, some places had several more inches than the 13 that was recorded at the airport.
With a rain-borne flood event, the amount of rain is not the only factor that determines its severity.
For us, where it falls is certainly a big factor. If it falls above or upstream of one of our storage projects, then we have the ability to capture that water, to hold it back, and then release it in a controlled manner. But when it falls into a watershed that flows directly into the Cumberland, say anywhere from below Wolf Creek Dam all the way past Clarksville, it's just going to come right into the river in an uncontrolled manner.
And that is unfortunately what happened in early May 2010. The heaviest rainfalls occurred well west or downstream of the Corps' main storage projects.
In a storage project or a flood control project, we purchased land to be able to store water there as needed to provide flood damage reduction benefits downstream. And that's the real key distinction between, say, Percy Priest, where we can store a good bit of water, and a project like Old Hickory or Cheatham, where we don't have flood control storage. They were authorized to provide commercial navigation and produce hydropower. But partially due to their location, they're in the floodplain of a very large river, so the lay of the land, it just doesn't really support them storing large volumes of water to reduce flooding. So the power of the flood damage reduction benefits, it's all derived from these tributary projects.
The Nashville District operates 10 projects on the Cumberland River. But the ones that experienced the heaviest rainfalls were Cordell Hull, Old Hickory, Percy Priest, Cheatham, and Berkeley. We're going to examine each of these projects individually to see how they were affected by the flood. Cordell Hull is the upstream-most main stem run-of-the-river project in the Cumberland system. Though it received less rainfall than the projects downstream, it still had its share of challenges to face. Cordell Hull experienced record headwaters during the flood and required precise operation of its system of spillway gates to avoid a potential overtopping of the upstream lock gate.
We've got these instructions. 508.0 was our maximum headwater, but it got to the point where we exceeded that and we were fixing to go over the top of the lock miter wall.
We knew that once we got to that level, then we will be looking at a possibility of free flow into the lock chamber, and that's not a good situation when you're looking at something like that.
Which could have not only damaged the lock, but led to free-flowing water over the lock portion of the project and unchecked flows headed downstream toward Nashville. In addition, the floodwaters at Cordell Hull produced record outflows from the spillways.
And I believe we got up to a total of 16 feet gate opening with a total discharge of 103,000 CFS, and which is quite a bit of water.
In the end, Cordell Hull weathered the storm nicely and fared better than many of the projects downstream.
Our operators did exactly what they were trained to do, and I commend them very highly. And our maintenance crew, they do a good job here keeping everything in operation. And as Tom Gray, one of our operators, he told me, he said, "Ray, I never was so proud of a plant in all my life that everything worked exactly like it's supposed to." And so that was just a good feeling for everybody.
Next in line is Old Hickory, which is unquestionably the most controversial project involved in the flood. Many have considered the Corps' release of water at Old Hickory to be one of the major causes of the flooding downstream. That is simply not the case.
Old Hickory is one of the main stem commercial navigation hydropower projects. We don't have the ability to store water there for flood control benefits. And so when water is released from any of the upstream storage projects, if it's released from Wolf Creek Dam, Dale Hollow Dam, or Center Hill Dam, it's going to come straight through and get to Old Hickory Dam without us having the ability to do anything about it. We have no option but to pass that water.
We had to open our spillways to maintain the integrity of our project and not flood it by overtopping it, which would have made it subject to failure.
The project held back as much water as it possibly could and was literally within inches of its maximum capacity.
We're at Old Hickory Lock and Dam today, and as you'll see behind me, the lake level as it is today, which is a normal level, is not very far below the top of the upstream lock gate. In May of 2010, when the lake rose, it actually got within about 7 inches of overtopping that gate. And if that had happened, it would have had catastrophic impacts, not only here at Old Hickory, but at points downstream. In fact, we've looked at that through a series of mathematical models, and the ultimate flood crest at Nashville would have been about 4 feet higher than we observed.
In addition to damaging the project itself, those 4 additional feet of water would have been enough to breach the Metro Center levees and flood the Omohundro water treatment plant, leaving Nashville with a critical shortage of clean water. But thanks to the hard work and dedication of the Nashville District, the project didn't overtop.
We had a pool of record here at Old Hickory and a tailwater of record. We had water on this structure where it had never experienced water like that before, and because of the training and the dedication of the people that work here, it functioned great, and they functioned great.
A few miles downstream of Old Hickory is Percy Priest, a storage project whose outflow joins the Cumberland River just upstream from Nashville.
Think of Percy Priest as sort of the last line of defense for Nashville. It's the project that has flood control storage capability that's closest to Nashville. Now, compared to some of these other projects we have, the volume's fairly small, but even that modest amount of storage can make a significant difference in a large event.
The rain that fell in May 2010 was certainly a large event. In fact, it filled Percy Priest to the very apex of its capacity.
We stored absolutely all we could store here and delayed to the last possible time coming on with spillway gate releases, because we wanted to delay doing that until after the flood crest had passed Nashville, had passed the Omohundro water plant and other critical areas in the Nashville area.
But the story doesn't end there. Record tailwater elevations threaten the project as well. But unlike projects like Cordell Hull and Old Hickory, the elevated tailwater didn't come from spillway gate releases.
The effect on Percy Priest was that the water backed up from the Cumberland River within 4 feet of flooding the plaza, which would have flooded the powerhouse, and that was just water backed up because Percy Priest Dam is so close to the Cumberland River. The water just backed up the Stones River from all the flooding.
Eventually, Percy Priest would have to release water, but there was a problem.
When we got ready to operate the gates, one of the gates failed to operate, and our senior electrician came in, identified the problem, and got the gates to operate.
I was called out to troubleshoot that particular gate, so I had to go into the cabinet and manually cut on that circuit breaker.
With the gate fixed, the project operated as designed and played a major role in May 2010's flood fight. Cheatham is no stranger to flooding. In fact, portions of the project are designed to withstand high water events. Still, no one could have anticipated just how high the water would get.
It was so quick. When that water hit the top of the wall, it just seems like there was nothing you could do to hold it back. I mean, it was just going and just raising. It seems like every time you turned around, there was another foot of water there.
With the water rising rapidly and no way to know when it might stop, the lock personnel began prepping the structure for a flood.
Had no idea how much it was going to flood. What we were doing when we were moving equipment up, we've got bulkheads that go in the windows and in the doors, and those bulkheads were built according to the highest flood on record. So we were trying to put everything above that mark.
Meanwhile, the Natural Resources team began preparing their areas for high water as well.
In the past floods that I had been through, and I've been here almost 30 years, the water had never gotten over the front porch of our office. Well, as we prepared for that by sandbagging the front of the office, putting all our files up on desk and elevating them. Worst case scenario, we thought maybe 2 foot in the office, 3 at the most.
With the water still rising, lock personnel placed themselves in danger by their continued efforts to prepare the lock for flooding.
There were 11 Corps team members securing the lock office. And as they secured the lock office, we saw the water rising. We headed out and we called them and said, it's time to go.
I've been here through several high water events and we've never left the building. I felt like we were abandoning ship. Didn't want to do that, but common sense, the way it was coming, we were going to have to.
But they couldn't leave. The water rose so rapidly that it stranded the lock personnel in the operations building. They would have to be evacuated by boat.
We were inside of the building and just watching the water creep up through the basement, up the stairs, coming to our level, and just waiting for that boat.
Ranger Potts and myself went in and took a John boat and actually ferried them over to the resource office, which was in slack water, 3 at the time, until we got them out of harm's way, basically, because it was rising rapidly.
The flood was too much for Cheatham, and no amount of effort could have saved it from damage.
We totally took the brunt of this flood, and everything we had went 8 to 10 to 12 feet underwater.
The lock was severely damaged and out of commission, but it was imperative that the Nashville District get it back up and running as soon as possible.
The most important thing at that point in time was getting the lock operations back, because the Gallatin Steam Plant, that provides a big portion of Middle Tennessee's electricity, only had 30 days of coal supply, and the coal all comes through barges through Cheatham Lock to Nashville.
We had volunteers across the district, Corps employees, volunteered to come down and assist. We had to take and remove all of the wiring. All of it was completely destroyed, all the control cable, everything. All the hydraulic pumps, we had to remove them. All the motors, we had to remove them. They were all taken out, rebuilt, baked, put back in. And then we went back into operation 19 days.
The lock wasn't the only thing that was destroyed in the flood.
The water in our office ended up 7.5 feet deep and destroyed the office. The fences were down, equipment had been scattered everywhere. It was just a total, looked like what it was, a disaster area. Much of what we got done in natural resources was by volunteers and opening up our recreation areas through the hard work of local people here in the area and the hard work of the natural resource staff, realizing that we had a lot of things to clean up and pressure wash and debris to move.
However, despite the massive devastation wrought by the flood, Cheatham rebounded.
I personally think no one realized the complete magnitude of what happened to us here at this project, but we survived it, we're back in operation, and we will continue to move forward.
Downstream from Cheatham is Lake Berkeley in western Kentucky, just a few miles upstream from the Cumberland's confluence with the Ohio River.
Berkeley's a little bit different than these other projects. It is a main stem commercial navigation project, but it also provides very valuable flood damage reduction benefits for the lower Ohio and also the Mississippi River.
Berkeley experienced flooding, but not from rain.
We had no rain at all here. When on Sunday, when I had initially heard of the flooding that was occurring in Nashville, the skies were clear, the sun was shining. It was a comfortable sunny afternoon.
Their high lake levels and large releases that were required to manage those levels were really related to what happened upstream.
The May 2010 flood caused Berkeley to shatter records for tailwater elevation.
We experienced a record tailwater elevation. I had never seen water that high before. However, we were still 9 feet below the project design. So the flooding, had we have met our maximum outflows like some of the other projects had, our flooding downstream would have been even worse than it was.
But even though the project could have put out more water than it did, the outflows were still significant.
We also had outflows in excess of 300,000 cubic feet per second, which is much greater than we'd ever seen.
And so was the damage the project received.
We experienced a lot of damage. We had a brand new restroom building we had just built, had never been used. Got floodwaters in it. We had picnic pavilions that were damaged, inundated. It took quite a bit of time and dedication from the employees here to work diligently and very hard, long hours and days to get these facilities opened back up so the general public could use them.
In the end, it is important to emphasize the cause of this flood.
I think the main thing to remember is we just had an unprecedented amount of rainfall. We had back-to-back extremely heavy rains that hit a wide area, really throughout the Cumberland River Basin. But a lot of the very heaviest rainfall was in the Middle Tennessee and Nashville area.
The May 2010 rain event was so unusual that not even the National Weather Service saw it coming.
We had no way to know that 15, 18, 19 inches of rain would fall in different places in Middle Tennessee. It is such an extreme event that we do not, it basically pushes the limits of our understanding of the atmosphere and certainly our model's predictive capacity to predict such an outlier event.
Still, the Cumberland River system did its job.
As bad as it was for many individuals and businesses, the reservoir system actually prevented probably about a 5-foot higher flood crest in Nashville.
But like every piece of infrastructure, the Cumberland River system and its projects have limitations.
I'm comfortable in saying that we utilized the full extent of the reservoir system. We stored water everywhere we could. We didn't leave out any opportunity to hold water back. So probably what's not necessarily good to hear, but if we have the same rainfall again with the same conditions, the same thing's going to happen because the reservoir system has limits. We can certainly reduce the level of flooding, and even in May that level of flooding was reduced significantly, but we cannot under all scenarios prevent flooding. We can only reduce its impact and the damage that it causes.
And in the early days of May 2010, the Nashville District did just that and will continue to do so in the future.